I'm here today in the Anglo-Saxon kingdom of Wēsaþ, Wessex, stood on the side of a beautiful and large Neolithic long barrow, which is today known as Adam's Grave. We're on the Pewsey Downs. It's a magnificent and beautiful landscape, and it's a beautiful September morning. Now, although this Neolithic long barrow is now known as Adam's Grave, the Anglo-Saxons had a different name for it. For we know that during the Anglo-Saxon period, this barrow was known as Woden-related, which means Woden's barrow. Now, I'm here today because I want to explore this incredible landscape, because there are some interesting facts which may indicate that this site was once sacred to the god Woden. We can start with place names. What we find here is a definite cluster of place names associated with Woden. Obviously, we've got the barrow here. Now, we're very close to the Ridgeway. Now, the Ridgeway, the name actually comes from Anglo-Saxon times. Very similar word, different spelling. It would have been the Ridgeway. And about a mile and a half in that direction, there is the Wansdyke. Now, the Wansdyke is a linear earthwork. It's believed that it was built during Anglo-Saxon times, and the name again actually comes from Woden's ditch, which means Woden's ditch or Woden's dyke. So that's two place names in a close proximity. Now, along the Wansdyke, there were a couple of other place names associated with Woden. Woden's Dean, Woden's Valley, and Woden's Gat, Woden's Gate. So the place names, there's a definite cluster of place names which could indicate that this landscape was once sacred to Woden. Now, let us not forget that one of Woden's functions was a war god. And according to the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, there were two battles fought at this site during Anglo-Saxon times. Now, the first one that the Chronicle tells us about happened in the year 591. Now, this was before the first Christian missionary, Augustine, arrived on the Kent shores to convert the people of this land to Christianity. So this was a definite period of heathen worship. So the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle says, Her Mitchell Walfil was at Woden-related, and Caelwyn was ut adriven, which in modern English means there was great slaughter at Woden's barrow, and Caelwyn was driven out. Now, over 100 years later, we have another record from the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. This was the year 715, and here we are told, Her Inna and Caelred futun at Woden-related. Here Inna and Caelred fought at Woden's barrow. Now, why these battles happened here, we will of course never know. One of the reasons could be strategic. Certainly, looking at this landscape, if you were positioned at the top of the slope, you would have a definite advantage over the army coming up the slope towards you. You've got great visibility here as well. We can see for miles. And we mustn't forget, of course, we are very close to the ancient trackway, the Ridgeway, which would, for the Anglo-Saxons, have been a hale path or a haleway, a path, a road used for the movement of armies. Now, of course, also the Wansdyke to the north of us here would have provided a defensive barrier. So there are various reasons why this could be a strategic landscape. Alternatively, Was this landscape chosen as the site of these battles because of its connection with Woden, the god of war? Was this seen as a particularly advantageous place to have a battle? As I said, we'll never know, but there was a piece of there is a piece of archaeological evidence which does add some further weight to the fact that this could be a landscape sacred to Woden. Now, just over there we have Knap Hill. Now, on Knap Hill there is an enclosed camp, a Romano-British camp, and when archaeological dig happened at this camp, which we will try and have a look at, what they found was it had been burnt out. Now, could this be part of one of the battles? We don't know, but what they did find was an Anglo-Saxon sword which dated from the 6th century. Now, I would say swords are extremely expensive objects, were extremely expensive objects to the Anglo-Saxons, precious objects, you know, they often named them. So at the end of a battle, it would be common practice to clear away, to gather all of the swords of your fallen enemy. So it isn't likely that a sword would be left there after a battle. Also, this sword was found in a non-funerary context, so it wasn't a weapon buried with a dead body. So if it wasn't left after a battle and it wasn't in somebody's grave, then there is a chance that it could have been an offering, a votive offering to the god Woden. Just thought I heard a raven. Anyway, we will check out these other places and we'll see what we can find. I can hear a raven. Ha! I love it when that happens. So we've walked along up the ridgeway and have now arrived at Wansdyke, Woden's ditch. Now, literally the first thing I found was this. Oh, it's heavy. This amazing hagstone. Isn't it incredible? Very heavy. So this is the eastern section of Wansdyke. I don't need my notes. So we're here on the eastern section of Wansdyke. Now, there really are two sections. Whether or not they were ever joined up at any point, I don't know. But the eastern section is generally the more impressive in stature. In places it's only surpassed by Devil's Dyke from Cambridgeshire, just down the road from where I grew up. But this particular section stretches from new buildings just south of Marlborough near Savernake Forest across to Morgan's Hill. Now, there is then another section in Somerset which sort of stretches from around south of Bath across to Mays Knoll. Now, the connection with Woden isn't unique to this ditch. In other places we find lots of earthworks which are known as Grimsdyke or Grim's Ditch. Now, Grim, of course, being another one of the names of Woden, although not attested in Old English literature. There are various place names in this country that are connected with Grim. Obviously a name which is used in Scandinavia, but also found in place names in the UK, such as you know, the Grimsdyke, which is now engulfed in London. It runs between Harrow and Bushey, and of course Grimes Graves in Norfolk. But as things became more Christianised, what we found was these dykes became known as Devil's Dyke or Devil's Ditch, as in the one in Cambridgeshire. So I don't know why why did the Anglo-Saxons associate these kind of defensive earthworks with Woden? It could be in his role as war god. We'll never know, but this is certainly a very atmospheric place. I'm going to keep going along it and see what I can find. So I've got the Wansdyke to my back, and I just wanted to show you how from this perspective you get a really good feel for where we sit in the landscape in relation to Knapp Hill, where the sword, the 6th century sword, was found as a possible offering, and then just over here Woden's Woden's barrow. You get a really good feel from here as to how these sites sit in relation to each other, and I really wish it would do it again, because just after we came out of the barrow and I'd been saying that nobody comes here anymore, there's a raven, and he's stopped now, hasn't he? I wish he'd do a flyover for us, wouldn't that be cool? But there's definitely a raven round here. So the raven is still visiting Woden's ditch, Woden's ditch. So I'm at the point on the ridgeway where it is intersected by the Wansdyke. Now, according to the map, this point is known as Redshaw, and there was, in the later Anglo-Saxon period, post-Christian conversion, there was apparently a gallows here, and it was a site where felons were hung. Now, if you've read your Norse sagas and myths, you will know that one of the names of Odin was Hangatyr, the hanged god. And as we can connect Odin with the Anglo-Saxon Woden, and I won't go into that now, but it is in the book that I'm currently writing, we could say, well, we could ask ourselves, why was a gallows in this spot? This spot, we know that they would place gallows in prominent places, quite often on the side of major roadways, and obviously the Ridgeway was a major roadway for the people at this time, so that could be the reason. But you know, were there other forces at work here? Because one of the ways that people would be sacrificed to Odin, and we know this from the story about Starkada, would be through hanging. So was the old man somehow causing people to make unknown sacrifices to him at this spot on the Wansdyke? Well, we'll never know, but it's good to speculate, isn't it? Just walking into the Wansdyke here, and apparently, according to historical sources, there were a couple of other place names in this locality on the Wansdyke associated with Woden, although those names have now been lost to history. But there was Woden's Dean, Woden's Valley, and also Woden's Gate, Woden's Gate. So there is something about this area, a definite concentration of Woden place names We've got this defensive earthwork. We've got the barrow. I mean, we know that hills and barrows were definitely associated with the worship of Woden. Pagan shrines were often placed on top of hills. So we've got Wansdyke, we've got Woden's barrow, we've got the two battles being fought here. We've got Woden's gate, and we've got Woden's valley. This is definitely a place with a strong connection to Woden. Where are you, Woden? So I'm now at the last place on this exploration of this landscape, which is possibly connected or sacred to Woden, and I'm up on Knapp Hill, which is a Neolithic causewayed camp. And as I said earlier, there is a small Romano-British earthwork on the side of this where a 6th century sword was found. Now, it's quite annoying because from up here you can see Woden's Dyke stretching across the horizon, and I think I can see the part which is meant to be the best preserved, and looking at it I don't think it was very far from where we were earlier, but just too far to walk today. But from up here you can see that this is an extremely impressive landscape. We've got Woden'sberg over there. We've got the most beautiful undulating Wiltshire countryside. So was this landscape sacred to Woden? I guess we can never truly answer that question, but there's certainly enough evidence to make it possible. Maybe fires were lit up on the top of these hills, maybe sacrifices were made to the great god Woden. We'll never know, but we can certainly imagine that this could very well have happened, because this landscape is truly spectacular.